There was a young couple who were in love, and they planned to run away together and get married. They arranged to meet at midnight beside the lotus pond. The girl showed up on time and waited for the boy to arrive. She waited and waited for such a long time, but her boyfriend never appeared. When the girl was going back to the dormitory, she suddenly spotted her boyfriend with another female classmate. The girl was so distraught that she began to cry and cry. She went back to the lotus pond and threw herself into the water. She committed suicide by drowning. Sometime after that, another young girl agreed to meet late at night at the lotus pond. The boy was early, so he waited at the water's edge, pacing back and forth. Suddenly, he heard a female voice behind him say, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy answered, "No." All of a sudden, two pale white hands emerged from the water and dragged him into the pond. He was drowned to death. Ever since then, at Chungchi, there is an unwritten rule. If you go to the lotus pond at midnight and you encounter a girl, do not answer her questions. Do not even look at her. Otherwise, your life will be in danger. The Wild Rose is a scary urban legend about a girl named Eliza Day who was murdered by her boyfriend many years ago. Many years ago in Ireland, there was a young woman named Eliza Day. People called her the Wild Rose because they said she was as beautiful as the wild roses that grew down by the river, all bloody and red. One day, a young man came into town, and from the first moment he set eyes on Eliza Day, he knew she was the one. He went to her house, knocked on her door, and introduced himself. He took her in his arms and kissed her ruby red lips. On the second day, the young man came back. He brought her a single red rose and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He asked her to meet him down by the river where the wild roses grew, so sweet and scarlet and free. On the third day, he took her down to the river. She stood on the bank and gazed silently into the water. The man kissed her on the lips one last time. Then he waited until her back was turned and beat her to death with a rock in his hand. As he killed her, he whispered, "All beauty must die." He placed a rose between her teeth and slid her body into the river, and she slowly disappeared beneath the clear, calm surface. Her body was never found, and over the years, her real name was forgotten. She was just referred to as the Wild Rose. Many people claim to have seen her ghost wandering along the banks of the river where the roses grow wild. Her head is bashed in, and blood is running down her face. They say she clutches a single rose in her hand. The Red Room is a scary urban legend about a pop-up that appears when you're surfing the internet. They say that if you close it, you will die. There was a boy who was addicted to the internet. He heard an urban legend about the Red Room from one of his friends at school. That evening, when the boy got home, he went to the internet to see if he could find out anything about it. All of a sudden, a small window popped up with a red background. Written in black was the message, "Do you like?" The boy closed the window, but it popped up again. He tried numerous times to close it, but it just kept reappearing. Eventually, the boy noticed that the question had changed. Now it read, "Do you like the Red Room?" And in the background, a childlike voice said, "Do you like the Red Room?" Just then, the screen went black, and a list of names appeared in red. At the bottom of the list, the boy saw the name of his friend, the friend who told him about the Red Room. All of a sudden, the boy became aware of something behind him, and he lost consciousness. The next day, the boy didn't turn up for school. there was a rumor going around that something had happened to him. The next day, his classmates heard the terrible news. The boy had committed suicide, painting his room red with his own blood. The Stair is a creepy story about a girl who takes the subway one night. A girl was sitting on the subway late one night. She noticed that the woman sitting across from her was staring intensely at her. The woman was sitting between two old men. The girl kept looking away, but the woman wouldn't break eye contact with her. The staring was beginning to freak the girl out. At the next stop, a new passenger got on. It was a tall man in a gray trench coat. He sat down next to the girl. The woman paid no attention to the man in the trench coat. She just kept staring at the girl, who was getting more and more creeped out as time went on. The two old men didn't even glance in her direction. She pretended not to notice, but each time she glanced at the strange woman, the stare continued. When the train was pulling into the next stop, the man in the trench coat got up to leave. Suddenly, he grabbed the girl's arm tightly, and as the doors opened, he dragged her off the train. The subway doors shut, and the train pulled off, leaving the girl alone on the platform with the man in the trench coat. She started screaming for help. "Calm down," said the man. "I just saved your life. I didn't mean to scare you, but I had to get you off that train. The woman sitting opposite of you was dead, and the two men beside her were propping her up." The Ghost Tracks is an urban legend from San Antonio about a railroad crossing that is said to be haunted by the ghosts of children who died there in a tragic accident when their school bus was hit by a train. Back in the 1940s, in San Antonio, Texas, a school bus full of children was making its way down the road and towards the intersection when it stalled on the railroad tracks. A speeding train smashed into the bus, killing 10 of the children and the bus driver. Since that dreadful accident many years ago, any car stopped near the railroads will be pushed by an unseen hand across the tracks to safety. They say that the spirits of the children push the cars across the tracks to prevent another accident and save the people from a tragic fate like theirs. As the story goes on, if you park your car directly over the tracks and shift into neutral, the ghosts of the children will push it uphill out of the way of oncoming traffic. And if you cover your bumper with baby powder or flour, you can reportedly see the children's handprints on your car. Numerous accounts have been reported that cars do, in fact, inexplicably move on their own, and mysterious prints are seen on the vehicles. Others allege that they have heard the voices and laughter of children while on the site. However, there is no record of such an accident in the newspaper archives anywhere in Texas. The road is slightly inclined, which could explain the cars moving by themselves. The Gold Coins is a ghost story from Spain about a haunted house and a young girl who discovers some hidden treasure in the middle of the night. The story of the gold coins is an urban legend that can be heard all over the city of Cordoba in Spain. Over the years, it has passed from person to person by word of mouth. According to the legend, in the center of Cordoba, there is an old, dilapidated house that is said to be haunted. The house is very big and has many rooms. All of the floors are covered in black tiles. Many years ago, it was owned by one of the most important and wealthy families in the city. The family consisted of a man, his wife, and their 8-year-old daughter. They also had a team of servants and maids who lived with them. One night, when the little girl was lying in bed, unable to sleep, she heard some noises in the corridor outside of her room. Being a very curious child, She slowly opened the door of her bedroom and looked out into the long, dark corridor. At the end of the hallway, she could make out a small figure crouching down. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she was surprised to see a young boy the same age as herself. He was carrying a lighted candle in his hand, and he was lifting one of the small stone slabs on the tiled floor. She watched as the young boy took something from his pocket and placed it beneath the tile. After he replaced the tile, the boy suddenly vanished into thin air. The girl couldn't believe what she was seeing. She looked back down the corridor and noticed that one of the maids had been peeking out of her own bedroom door and had witnessed the same strange scene. The maid grabbed a candle and came hurrying over to the little girl. They both knew what they had seen. The young boy was a ghost. Together, they cautiously approached the place where the boy had been crouching. They lifted the tile and discovered that there was a large hole underneath it. Peering down into the hole by the dim light of the candle, they noticed something glittering. The maid held up the slab as she lowered the girl into the hole. The child could not believe what she found. It was a pile of gold coins. Shaking with excitement, she gathered up the coins and handed them to the maid. Then, the maid grabbed her by the hand and pulled her out of the hole. They replaced the tile and it fit back perfectly, looking like it had never been moved. The maid could hardly believe her luck, and the child could barely contain her excitement. Both of them decided they should keep the discovery of the gold coins a secret. The maid warned the little girl not to mention anything about their find to their parents or to the other servants. The next night, at the same time, the girl and the maid were peeking out of their bedroom doors, eagerly waiting for the ghostly little boy to appear. They watched as the spectral figure made its way down the corridor, lifted a tile, and placed some gold coins into the hole beneath. After he disappeared, the maid lowered the girl into the hole under the slab so that she could again retrieve the gold coins. Night after night, they repeated the same process. It seemed as if the treasure would never end. Each time, by the light of the candle, the girl got down into the small, narrow hole under the tile and gave the gold coins to the maid, who put them inside a big sack. One night, the candle was almost finished and the maid lowered the girl into the hole. The light started to flicker. The maid told the little girl to hurry up. She had to get out of the hole before the candle went out because they already had enough money. She pulled the little girl out of the hole, but at the last moment, one of the coins fell from the girl's hand. Without thinking, the little girl jumped back into the hole again. The maid tried to catch her, but in doing so, she let go of the tile and it slammed down, covering the hole. Suddenly, the candle went out. The maid began to panic. In the darkness, she tried to make her way down the corridor to her bedroom to fetch another candle. It was pitch black and she couldn't see a thing. She had to feel her way along the wall until she reached her bedroom door. Searching desperately in the dark, she couldn't find any candles. With a lot of difficulty, the maid felt her way down the darkened corridor until she came to the kitchen. She rummaged through the drawers and eventually came across another candle. She lit it quickly and returned to the corridor. To her horror, the maid couldn't remember which tile the little girl was under. In the dim light, she searched, prying at each tile, but the corridor was so long and wide, and there were so many tiles that she was unable to find the right one. Finally, she gave up, and clutching her bag of gold coins, she went back to bed. In the morning, the little girl's parents woke up to find that their daughter had disappeared. They questioned the servants, but each one said they had no idea where the little girl could be. A complete search of the house was organized, but it turned up to be nothing. The distraught parents were baffled by their daughter's mysterious disappearance. The maid decided not to say anything about what happened last night. A few days later, the mother was crying in her bedroom when she heard a voice calling out. She recognized the voice immediately. It was the voice of her daughter. The little girl was crying out for someone to help her. "Please, help me. Let me out of here, please." The mother searched the house again. Sometimes the screams seemed to be coming from one part of the house, but when she got there, the screams sounded like they were coming from somewhere else. Try as they might, the parents could not pinpoint the source of the screams. They dug up the floors, demolished the walls, and punched holes in the ceilings, all in an effort to figure out where the girls' cries for help were coming from. After almost destroying the interior of the house, the parents were forced to admit defeat. For months, they lived in the building, listening to the incessant cries of their beloved daughter, unable to do anything to find her. All of this took its toll on their mental and physical health. Eventually, the mother lost her mind and ended her life. The father, devastated by grief, moved away and died of a heart attack a few years later. The people of Cordoba say that this is a true story and that the house is still standing today. According to the legend, if you go there at night, they say you can still hear the screams of the little girl pleading for help. The house has become famous all over Spain, and sometimes teenagers visit the place at night to test their courage and see if they can find any gold coins. Others go there to explore the huge building in an attempt to discover where the remains of the girl are located. As of yet, nobody has been brave enough to spend the night there. The house is now boarded up, and the parents often call the police because of the strange cries and screams that come from within. They say that when the police arrive to investigate, the only thing they find is an old candle, sitting on an old stone tile in the middle of the floor. The Little Boy is a creepy true story about a young boy named Larry, who was lost when his father's truck crashed in the desert and he was trapped inside. Nobody knew if it was real or just a hoax. One hot, sweltering summer, many years ago, people who lived in New Mexico began picking up strange messages on their CB radios. The messages were from a little boy who said his name was Larry and he was asking for help. He said that his father had been taking him to hunt rabbits. They were in the desert, miles from nowhere, when the red and white pickup truck they were driving ran off the road. The truck backflipped over, and they were trapped inside. His father was lying on top of him and wasn't moving. The messages were reported to the local authorities, and the police launched a search for the little boy in the foothills of New Mexico. Even though some people thought it was a hoax, the police took it seriously. This child might have been somewhere in the desert. However, Larry had no idea where he was. He was struggling to answer questions and became confused easily. Some people thought that, perhaps, he had an injury. He said his legs and knees had been hurt in the crash. By the second day, Larry was not transmitting regularly. Other people joined in the conversation on their CB radios. Some of them were concerned citizens who had honestly wanted to help. Others were hecklers who wanted to make fun of Larry. Some of them tried to ask questions that might pinpoint exactly where in the desert the truck had crashed. They asked Larry what he remembered and what he had seen before the truck flipped over. Others would just scream and call him fake. By the third day, Larry's voice was growing weaker and weaker. He said his father hadn't moved at all, and the searchers were sure the man must have died. Hecklers taunted him, shouting, "Die, die, die." Shortly afterward, Larry's transmissions faded away and he was never heard from again. The police didn't have much to go on, and the case remained unresolved. A family who had a son named Larry was reported missing, but eventually they were found in a different city, alive and well. The police did come across an overturned truck in the desert that seemed to fit the description. However, there was nobody inside. In the end, the police called off the search. Was it all a hoax? Or are the skeletal remains of a little boy named Larry still lying undiscovered somewhere in the New Mexico desert today? Perhaps we will never know. The Seventh Barn, or the Seven Barns, is a scary urban legend about a haunted barn in Ohio that is believed to have been the scene of the grisly murders of an entire family. There was a wealthy farmer who owned a lot of land in Ohio. He built a new barn on his property every time his wife had a baby. He named the barn after each of his children, and by the time this story takes place, they had 6 kids and were expecting number 7. However, the family's wife died in childbirth, and so did their unborn baby. The farmer went inside with grief and couldn't tend his farm. The family had no money, and the farm started going under. They say that one night, in the depths of his madness and despair, the family took an axe and led his children out to the barns where he murdered them one by one. He buried each of their bodies in the 6 barns that had been named after them. Then, the farmer went to the 7th barn, where he hung himself. As the story goes, all of the barns were eventually torn down and the land was sold off. All except the 7th barn. Nobody wanted to buy the land because of what had happened there, so it was abandoned and soon fell into disrepair. They say that if you go to the barn at night, you can see the ghost of the farmer hanging from the rafters, his body swaying back and forth in the wind, dwelling on his terrible crime for all eternity. No one was really sure where the 7th barn was located, although it was definitely in Ohio. Some said it was the Kranz Farm in Cuyahoga Valley, and others said it was at the top of the world in Northampton. In 1997, a local Ohio teacher claimed that, after a lot of research, he had finally managed to track down the real location of the infamous 7th barn. He said that none of the barns had actually ever been torn down. The land had just been divided up and sold off, and the barns had simply been incorporated into the neighboring farms. According to the teacher, he was able to pinpoint the correct location because all of the barns on the neighboring properties had nameplates above their doors. They had the names of the children engraved on them. The teacher and his son set out at night to visit the barn, bringing a video camera with them in hopes of capturing some paranormal activity. The next morning, the teacher's wife reported her husband and son missing. Police found their abandoned car by the roadside. While searching the area, they encountered a barn in a nearby field and found the dead bodies of the teacher and his son hanging from the rafters. The Scary Clown Statue story is an urban legend about a babysitter who finds herself alone in the house with a creepy statue of a clown. Some people believe that this is a true story, but in reality, it's just an urban myth. A few years ago, there was a wealthy couple who had 2 young children, a boy and a girl. The family lived in a large house in Newport Beach, California. After taking care of their kids all week, the mother and father decided that they needed a break, and so they booked a table for dinner at a nice restaurant. That evening, they called a teenage girl they knew and arranged for her to come over and babysit their children while they were out. When the babysitter arrived, the parents told her to fix supper for the kids and put them to bed. After that, you can just watch TV and help yourself to anything in the fridge, the father said. And if you wouldn't mind, said the mother, could you watch TV in our room? The kids have been having nightmares recently, so if you hear them crying, You can just go in and calm them down." The babysitter happily agreed, and the parents left for their dinner date. The girl gave the children some milk and cookies, then ushered them upstairs to bed. She started to read them a bedtime story, and before long, the little boy and girl were fast asleep. After tucking them in, she switched off the lights and went to watch TV. When the babysitter walked into the parents' bedroom and sat down, she noticed that there was a creepy-looking clown statue standing in the corner of the room. She tried to ignore it, but it looked so eerie and disturbing that it sent chills down her spine. She felt as though its eyes were staring straight at her while she watched TV. As time passed, the babysitter started to feel more and more uneasy about the clown statue. Whenever she glanced at it, she got the unsettling feeling it had moved ever so slightly. Finally, the clown statue began to freak her out so much that she couldn't handle it any longer. She decided to go downstairs and phone the parents. When she dialed the number they had left for her, the father answered. "Hi, it's me," said the babysitter. "Everything's fine. The kids are fast asleep in bed, but I was just wondering, would it be okay if I watched TV downstairs?" "Of course," replied the father. "But why?" "I know it sounds silly," laughed the girl, "but the clown statue is creeping me out." "The clown statue?" asked the father. "Yeah, the clown statue in your bedroom," the girl replied. The phone went silent for a moment. "Listen to me very carefully," said the father. "Take the children and get out of the house. We will call the police. Go now." "What's wrong?" asked the girl. The father gulped and replied, "We don't have a clown statue." For a second, the babysitter stood there, stunned. Then, she dropped the phone and raced upstairs and grabbed the children. Carrying one under each arm, she raced downstairs and fled out into the street. Huddled on the sidewalk, comforting the two children, the babysitter looked at the bedroom and saw something that made her scream out in horror. Peeking through a gap in the curtains was the white, painted face of a clown. It stared at her for a moment, then sank back into the darkness. Within minutes, the police arrived and cautiously entered the house. In the upstairs bedroom, they found a man dressed in a clown suit. When they arrested him, they found a knife concealed in his costume. The clown turned out to be a mentally disturbed midget who was a convicted murderer and cold-blooded killer. The evil man had been stalking the family for months, lurking in their attic during the daytime and coming out to sneak around the house at night. For weeks, the children had been complaining about a clown statue that stood in their room and watched them sleep. But the parents just dismissed this as nightmare that runs along the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They call it Single Braid Road, and many students claim to have encountered the ghostly figure of a girl with long braided hair walking alone at night. It is said that one cold night, a girl with long braided hair took great plans to sneak into Hong Kong from the mainland. She was an illegal immigrant and came with her boyfriend. The couple took the train into the city. Unexpectedly, the girl saw police boarding the train and checking passports and identification. Worried that they would catch her, she decided to jump off the moving train. As she jumped, her braid got caught in the window frame. The hair was ripped off her scalp, and the skin was ripped off of her face as well. The girl stumbled onto Single Braid Road, where she collapsed and died. The next day, the police found the girl's dead body lying in a pool of blood. They cleaned up the mess, and that seemed to be the end of it. Her boyfriend saw what happened, but he decided to continue with the train. When he reached his destination, he found a job and never looked for his girlfriend or tried to find out what happened to her. However, one night, A male student was walking along Single Braid Road when he saw a girl standing there. She had her back turned to him, and all he could see was the long braids down her back. When he called out to her, she didn't answer. When the student came nearer, he tapped the girl on the shoulder. She turned around and the boy saw, to his horror, that she had no face, no eyes, no ears, no nose, and no mouth. Then she just disappeared into thin air. They say that the girl's ghost has appeared many times since then, but only male students can see her. The New Pet is a famous urban legend about a woman who goes to New Mexico and brings back a stray dog. There was once a woman who went to New Mexico on vacation. She got bored with hanging around the resort hotel and decided to explore the town. After doing a little shopping and buying a few souvenirs, she happened to see a little dog trotting down a dusty alley between two buildings. She was immediately smitten with the cute little animal and followed it. When she caught up to the dog, she picked it up and it started licking her face. The dog didn't have any collar or tag, so she assumed it was a stray. The animal was so adorable that she decided to adopt it. It's illegal to transport animals back from New Mexico to the United States, so on the journey back home, she hid the little dog under her sweater and pretended that she was pregnant. The guards at the border crossing never suspected a thing. Back in the United States, she brought her new pet back to her apartment and gave it a bath. Then she set out a bowl of food for the little dog to eat. She set out a blanket in the kitchen for the creature to sleep on, and then went to a restaurant to have dinner. When she came home a few hours later and walked into the kitchen, she found her new pet chewing a hole through the wall. There was an oozing mucus coming around the animal's eyes, and it was foaming from the mouth. Afraid that her new pet might be sick, she wrapped it up in a blanket and let it sleep in her bedroom. The next morning, the woman woke up to find the creature gnawing on her ear. She screamed and pushed it away. The woman realized that her new pet was seriously ill and took it to the vet. She sat impatiently in the office, waiting for him to see her. As soon as the vet came out, the woman rushed over, carrying her pet in her arms. "There is something wrong with my dog," she said. He took one look at it and asked, "What did you think this was?" "I'm not sure what breed it is," she replied. "I think it's some kind of rare Mexican breed." The vet shook his head. "This is no dog," he said. "This is a sewer rat." The woman was horrified. "A sewer rat?" she cried. "Yes," said the vet, "but the bad news is it has rabies."